Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Thursday, October 10th, 2024. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal and the bowels of the Bellagio Hotel in Las Vegas, Nevada for the 2024 Mass Torts Conference in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, too. I don't know. I got mixed up on that. On the program today, Hurricane Milton leaves at least 4 dead, but Florida escapes the worst-case scenario. Florida had the record number of tornado warnings in a single day in that state yesterday. Price gouging abounds. We'll talk more about that later. Polls continue to show a tight race in swing states. Israel fires on UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Orders a total cleansing of Palestinians from northern Gaza. Inflation ticks up in the wake of good job numbers in this country. And the Social Security cost of living increases have been announced, 2.5%, a little lower than we've expected in the past, but that's because of cooling inflation. Meanwhile, Russia gaining ground in Ukraine. The Manhattan DA, turns out, also seized Eric Adams and other advisors' phones in late September on a separate corruption investigation. All this, and we'll hear from a couple of attorneys who are engaged in mass torts cases on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. It is
Thursday.
I don't know
Thursday.
I'm never here on Thursday, so I don't know what the.
It's called
Samless Day.
It's called a Majority Report. So.
Awkward.
Yeah, funny seeing you here, huh? Don't just
very
taking
awkward.
everything from women all the time.
Oh, jeez. Wow. Okay. That's. I'm trying to figure out how I can fix my volume here. Without it. Oh, that shouldn't. Yeah. Okay. That should do fine. It. No. My volume into my headphones was a little bit too loud. Yeah. So, folks, just a reminder, I am in Las Vegas, Nevada. I am sitting at a booth in a exhibitors hall. There are, I don't know how many attendees are here, but approximately, 800, maybe more, attorneys from around the country. This conference, lawyers get some type of have some type of requirement with the Bar Association that they have to have, and I imagine this is also in other professions. They have to have, I think, a certain number of hours of professional training over the course of a year. They come here to learn best practices, both from a legal standpoint, but also from a business standpoint, I guess, and an operations standpoint on launching these mass tort cases. Today, we're going to talk to an attorney regarding the tort, basically, they're not quite class action cases, but something similar regarding social media. It's going to have big implications for Section 230. I think we had mentioned the TikTok case a couple of weeks ago. first time a social media company had been held liable for something like this. And then we're going to be talking to someone on the some of the cases that are coming out of the widespread use of these GL1 inhibitors. There, I think that's what they're called. Things like Wegovy and Ozempic, that type of medicine. And I'm hoping to find somebody on the insulin price fixing cases that are here, but that's being efforted as I speak. We'll see. We had some problems with me screwing up my calendar. Matt, you got something going on there? Or what?
Oh, no, we're good.
Okay. I screwed up my calendar. I tried to use a sneaky online or a tricky online calendar, and then I forgot to set it to Pacific time. I screwed up.
Okay.
Time zone error.
Let's we'll be having our first guest, I think, in about 35 minutes or so. Let's play this clip. I mean, we play clips from the Good Liars a decent amount. They're funny.
Almost a decade now.
I guess it's been a decade. Wow. There was something about this one that was like uniquely disturbing to me, and I'm not exactly sure why. Like, when you have people believing in like QAnon and these type of conspiracy theories, you're like, okay, they're so far gone. They're living in a completely alternate universe. But somehow the conspiracies about the weather, because at least part of that is absolutely true. There is a hurricane, and we all agree on this. It's the other part, in the sort of like the fact that, well, part of it is something, yes, that we all accept, and then the other part of it is absolutely batcrap crazy, and the depth of understanding, and then where it goes into home utensils. Let's play this clip. This is a Trump voter. And it's secondary to me that it's a Trump voter, because it's really just someone participating in our civil society, and probably indicative of a lot of people who are participating in our society. We mentioned the other day that, this is Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is not fringe stuff in the Republican Party. She is one of the top fundraisers in the Republican Party. This woman is just some random Trump rally goer, but check this out.
What do you think happened with the hurricanes?
I think there was an upcoming storm, and then I think government set in with whatever it is that they do. I don't know all the specifics about it. I'm not an expert in cloud seeding or whatever it is that they use to magnify the storm to a higher degree, to disturb a land that maybe wanted for lithium that Harris's husband is partaking in.
So they made the storm stronger, so it would hit the.
Doing with this one.
You think that Milton, they're making it stronger?
From a 2 to immediately to a 5, instantaneously.
You're implying that the government made a hurricane stronger to hurt its own country, the United States of America?
Correct.
And what would be the gain of that?
If there's been people out there, if they have an Alexa, I don't know if you've heard that, and they've asked what caused Milton.
Okay.
You can go on there now. It's already predicted the number of deaths and the amount of. It's already predicted it. On a Google, it won't do that. If you ask it about Helene, it'll tell you the government actively used seed clouding. This is before Helene even happened.
Why would a country want to have a hurricane be strong and hit its own country?
Because they want to control certain places. And if you're looking at where the hurricane's going, it's a lot of red states. If you're looking at the counties in North Carolina that were hit, there were all of them, 26 out of 28 of those counties were for Trump. They're doing whatever they can because they can't rig the election.
Even control the weather?
Yes.
Now, let's just...
You know what that's disturbing to me is that it's like it reminds me of anti-vax stuff, right? Where this is like the kind of phenomenon that should be essentially bringing people together and standing in unison, like, okay, we as a society need to hunker down and make sure that our fellow citizens are safe in Florida. And in the same way that the pandemic was like, okay, let's all shelter in place. Let's, if we can, let's mask, let's get vaccinated. Like these notions of the public good, there's none of that in our society in so many ways. And it's warped into conspiracism about this overall control that is fundamentally like anti-communal.
Yeah, but it's also, I mean, it has implications too along those lines in terms of COVID. You know, if you don't think COVID is real, you think it's a pandemic, then you don't take it seriously. More people die. You know, similarly, but the idea, just starting from like the end, going forward, the government has the ability, and not just the government, right? It's the Democrats, because they can do this when they're out of office too. Let's not kid ourselves. They can control the weather, but they cannot rig the election. Like what? Like whoa! It's a weird. Election results are kryptonite, but weather, that's low hanging fruit. And then she said at the beginning too, there was a healthy dose of well, I don't know if I would call it anti-Semitism, but it was sort of like vapors of anti-Semitism, where they're doing this because
Doug
Kamala Harris is.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
Husband,
how does one engage in lithium?
No, he wants to corner the lithium market by buying up the land, I guess, where all the lithium is, you know, that huge vein of lithium mining that takes place in central Florida. And he's going to corner it. It's weird that it was Emhoff who's interested in cornering it.
It's so odd.
He's a lawyer, isn't he? I mean, it's like
well, it is interesting that you'd say that, Sam, because I know you've had your eyes on some lithium recently. You keep talking about that behind the scenes.
Honestly, like I was almost at an auction to try and scoop up property in Florida right now. But and then the stuff with the Alexa, I mean, this is like she believes this.
Yeah.
And it is, I think, and you know, there's being so much misinformation that is being pumped out for the purposes of supposedly helping Trump and whatnot. But what it really clearly does is it undermines, like you say, the communalism, the notion that government is a resource when it comes to hurricanes, not the cause of hurricanes or the cause of how destructive the hurricane is. I think she would concede that the weather is real, but what the government does, of course, is amplify it when it's the storm heading in the right direction.
And I saw that there were people that were refusing to leave the area. Thankfully, the storm wasn't as lethal as had been anticipated. A lot of people
couldn't leave too.
Right, that's
I saw
true.
one lady whose husband apparently made a giant mansion made of concrete that was staying there, and she was also making her servant stay there.
Yeah, and like they were showing people, you know, I saw even just regular news reports were showing some people didn't leave, etc. But there was a guy that they nicknamed Lieutenant Dan. He was going viral because he lived in his boat and he wasn't going to leave. And people were taking bets on whether or not he would live or die or things like that. Like,
hey, Adam Silver, get involved.
It reminds me of the pandemic in that sense of just, we have for such a long period of time, I feel like, I mean, starting with Alex Jones, he was the one who started the Jews control the weather thing or whatever, or not started it, but more mainstream.
There's a weather machine. I think it was Obama had the weather machine, but I'm not,
it's hard to discern.
But it is amazing how we have gone from Alex Jones, marginal fringe, to God. I mean, I don't know what percentage of our country believes this, but it's not. It's greater than 1 or 2. One gets the idea. Like, you know,
Marjorie Taylor Greene believes all this, like the Sandy Hook conspiracy stuff. She's top Republican fundraiser, as you always say.
Terrifying stuff. We'll talk more about hurricane response, particularly in terms of price gouging, in a moment. First, a couple of words from our sponsors. Oh, this is exciting. My sister has tried this. Back in February, I did this and was really impressed with my ability to do it, frankly. And as a function of Prolon, you can forget everything you know about fasting. Prolon by L Nutra is the only patented fasting mimicking diet that combines the benefits of prolonged fasting with a science-backed nutrition plan so you can hit your health and weight loss goals without actually having to give up all food. Introducing Prolon, it's a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while making cells believe they're fasting. Researched and developed for decades at the University of Southern California Longevity Institute, backed by leading U.S. medical centers, Prolon helps promote healthy blood sugar, support cardiovascular health, and reduce abdominal fat. Prolon is not a diet. Prolon is science. Science based on Nobel Prize-winning discoveries in medicine. And this all starts with Prolon's 5-day program, snacks, soup, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. It really is unlike anything you've ever experienced. I did this back in February. I was sort of shocked. I was interested in it in the there's a lot of literature about longevity, and once you get through like multiple stages of where your cells start to regenerate a little bit. I mean, it's I don't want to make it sound more dramatic than it is, but there's this came out of that Longevity Institute, and it was not as hard as I thought it was going to be. I was able to do the show every day. My sister has, I think she's now on day 4 or 5. I haven't been around, but she told me she's had good energy. She was awake when she was driving.
When you did this, I was worried, oh no, is Sam going to be cranky? And you actually weren't at all. So
I know.
Same. I had the exact same brainwave.
Yeah. There
I'm
we
like,
go.
oh, that was this week?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be a mess, but it's no wonder why thousands of doctors now recommend Prolon to support healthy blood sugar and cardiovascular health. Right now, Prolon's offering the Majority Report with Sam Seder listeners 15% off their 5-day nutrition program. Go to prolonlife.com/majority. That's PROLON life.com/majority for this special offer. We will put a link in the podcast and YouTube descriptions, of course, and at majority.fm. Also, very often, and you know, I actually see this at this conference. So much of what the attorneys do is supported by these other sort of subsidiary businesses. And it is the same with the Majority Report when it comes to our merch. We would have never been able to do a merch store if we had to sort of like build this ourselves or make it complicated. And fortunately, nobody does selling better than Shopify. It is the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. And the not so secret with Shop Pay that boosts conversions up to 50%, which means that there are way less carts going abandoned and way more sales that are happening. So if you're growing your business, your commerce platform better be ready to sell wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. That means on the web or in your IRL store or in their feed, on social media, and everywhere in between. We're going to be able to, when we sell merch at our live show, we're going to be able to integrate it with our sales on our website at shop.majorityreportradio.com. Our merch is not our #1 business, but which is why it makes it much easier. But if it ever turned into it, Shopify could handle it, because businesses that sell more sell on Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout. It's places like Allbirds or Majority Report Radio. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/majority. Also, let's plug the that fundraiser that you got.
Yes.
They had talked about yesterday. Do you have the details there?
Yeah, Bradley, Bradley's pulling it up right now, but on Monday, we interviewed a reporter who's working within Gaza. His name is Rakan Abdelrahman. He is, one of the surviving journalists there. I mean, Israel has killed well over 100 journalists within Gaza, and he spoke to us from Gaza. We were thrilled to get him on October 7th to talk about what he's experienced. I was connected with him through somebody else who said basically, he doesn't want to advertise this GoFundMe because he's just trying to do his work, but that he is trying to raise some money to support his work and his family. He's the father of multiple young children. His daughter, I believe, was born after, I think in November of 2023. So she's been born into this active genocide. You can scroll down. I think there's a photo of her, Bradley, if you don't mind, in the description. Read more. Yeah. So there she is. Rakan's family consists of 7 family members. You can see a photo of her there after she was born, and there's a more updated one of her down there as well. So as a father, he was talking about how it's quite difficult for him to balance wanting to do his job as a journalist, but feeling like as he goes out, he's risking his life. And so I just am in awe of all the brave people that are trying to get the word out here. So if you have any extra money or if you want to share that on your social media, the GoFundMe's link is in the description below. Yeah, important. Amazingly heroic journalism, and I would say shame on the Western press that has been largely silent, I'd say with a few exceptions, on the targeted killing of those people. And we also, of course, have the Mohammed Al-Dagma bakery fundraiser as well to feed people in Gaza, which should also be in our description. And we'll, either way, if you could support these wonderful people doing work to save lives in Gaza, would be appreciated. It is pretty amazing to think about how so many in the U.S. media came to the aid of Fox News when they were put into the back row in the Washington press pool by the Obama administration, and how outraged everyone was that their sister organizations or cousins or whatever they referred to them as at the time, and how silent they are at the killing of well over 100 journalists in Gaza now. But let's turn to back to the hurricane for a moment. One of the early sort of, I guess, policies that Kamala Harris rolled out was one on price gouging. Now, the price gouging was not as dramatic, I think, as people had made it at the time. It was more sort of focused, frankly, on things like in the wake of hurricanes or in the wake of national emergencies like COVID. Frankly, I think there's some price gouging that happens, particularly in the rental space, at other times, but nevertheless, completely apropos for the last couple of weeks, because of what we've seen in the wake of Helene and in the run up to Milton, whether it was airline tickets, whether it was, I'm sure we saw this in the context of hotels, and we saw it in the context of gasoline and retail sales. Here is Kamala Harris. She was on she called into the Weather Channel. She called into the Weather Channel. Listen to this.
There are federal resources you are entitled to receive without condition. And there are resources that are available to you to deal with what you need right now, to, for example, get money to be able to fill your prescriptions and deal with a hotel expense and help you recover over the longer term. The other point I would make is this, and I've done this work in my career. Sadly, there are some folks who, during the moment of a crisis, will be very predatory and start jacking up prices like gasoline or hotels or airlines to take advantage of the desperation people are experiencing. So to anybody who's thinking about jacking up those prices, those companies that are thinking about doing it, know that we are monitoring and we're watching. And if there is that kind of price gouging, that there will be a consequence for that, because it's just wrong to take advantage of people who are desperate for help. And so know that we're watching that as well.
And that has happened quite a bit. They're not just in, I mean, it's likely to happen in the wake of Hurricane Milton, but in the wake of Hurricane Helene, which was 2 weeks ago, there were reportedly hundreds of complaints about price gouging in Georgia. In the wake of Helene, North Carolina also experienced that. Florida had to extend its price gouging hotline because of some of the practices that are being described there. And I'm hoping that the Democrats run with this a little bit more. It's like they've abandoned a lot of this talk in this latest 6+ week kind of appeal to disaffected Republicans push. But the reality is that
those disaffected Republicans are still very much in favor 100%. Of price gouging, and
exactly.
So you don't want to get too much in their face, but it's actually true.
But it's true. Well, yeah, but it's also interesting when you poll Americans. There was a Data for Progress poll: 72% of Americans support a federal ban on price gouging. So you should be able to make this case easily, and I was glad she did that. And you know, who took on price gouging pretty effectively was a woman named Lena Khan under the Biden administration. So
there's a great piece out in Business Week, which I think has been unlocked. Actually, is it Bloomberg or
it was
Business
Bloomberg?
Week?
Yeah.
And Josh Idelson.
Oh, I guess they're the same. Bradley says so.
They are the same.
Bloomberg Business Week.
It's Bloomberg Business Week is a component.
Okay, I was right. Yeah.
And Josh Idelson wrote the piece. He's a former labor reporter, and he's writing basically on how upsetting Lena Khan is to both, big Republican billionaires, but also some Democratic billionaires. There was a really sort of funny line. I don't know how to articulate that, but the line to the effect of like, well, you know, she's taking money, she's cutting into the profits of billionaire donors and multimillionaire donors, and that's money that could go into the Democratic race, but it's not there anymore. You'll recall that what's his name? The
Reid Hoffman.
Reid Hoffman.
Yeah.
Who was one of the first ones to come out and say, you know, she should get rid of Lena Khan. Turns out he's under investigation, or is his business enterprises 5 different Federal Trade Commission investigations. So that, you know, it's a little, he might not have been the best messenger to bring this out, but it's still fascinating to me that the most talked about member of an administration is the Federal Trade Commission head. I mean, this gives you an indication of just how much work she's doing on behalf of the American public versus monopolistic and concentrated power and wealth. It's impressive, I have to say, and hopefully all of this talk and these stories about Lena Khan and making it really clear who it is that supports her ouster and who it is that supports her remaining there will make it that much more difficult for Harris, if she wins, to get rid of her.
Yep.
And, you know, which is a legitimate concern based upon who we know some of Harris's key advisors are. With that said, I want to talk about this thing that we sort of neglected to talk about earlier in the week. It got sort of just swallowed up. Emma, you and I had been talking about waiting for her to roll out some parts of her care economy. She came out with a big policy proposal, I guess it was like 2 or 3 days ago, involving Medicare. Part of it is an expansion of some of the services under Medicare, which is good, but it's not the marquee part about it. The marquee part about it has to do with home health care. Do we have that clip?
Yeah.
Let's play
Here
that.
she is on The View earlier this week.
Issue is a personal one for me because I am part of what they call the sandwich generation. I'm an only child, and I will likely be responsible for taking care of my children and my parents at the same time.
And us also.
And perhaps Joy and my co-host. My mother, in fact, she's here in the audience, as I've told you. She's a retired teacher. Her application. Her application for long-term health care was denied because of a pre-existing health condition. You are announcing on our show a plan to ease the financial and emotional burdens on families like mine, caring for our aging loved ones. What is that plan?
So, Sonny, like you, I took care of my mother when she was sick. She was diagnosed with cancer. And so it is a personal experience for me as well as something I care deeply about. You know, taking care of a parent, you know, that means trying to cook what they want to eat, what they can eat. It means picking out clothes for them that that's soft enough that it doesn't irritate their skin, right? It means trying to think of something funny to make them laugh or smile. And there's so much about that really is about giving folks dignity. And to your point about being in the sandwich generation, there are so many people in our country who are right in the middle. They're taking care of their kids and they're taking care of their aging parents. And it's just almost impossible to do it all, especially if they work. We're finding that so many are then having to leave their job, which means losing a source of income, not to mention the emotional stress. And so what I am proposing is that basically what we will do is allow Medicare to cover in-home health care. So, and because we're talking about these kinds of things where it's just about helping an aging parent or person, you know, prepare a meal, you know, put their sweater on. And it's about dignity for that individual. It's about independence for that individual. I mean, people are of declining skills to some extent, but their dignity their pride has not declined. They want to stay in their home. They don't want to go somewhere else. Plus, for the family to send them to a residential care facility to hire somebody is so expensive.
Wipes you out.
And I'll just say, well, but here's the other thing about it. So, you know, people say, well, how are you going to pay for it? Here's the thing. Here's how we pay for it. Part of what I also intend to do is allow Medicare to continue to negotiate drug prices against these big pharmaceutical companies, which means we are going to save Medicare the money because we're not going to be paying these high prices, and those resources are best then put in a way that helps a family like the one you are describing.
Which you have already done.
Which we have already done with insulin.
So she doesn't talk about the other piece that was announced, right? The part about vision and dental, if I'm not mistaken. But still, you know, good idea.
There's also, I mean, I would add, there's also, according to the fact sheet, that this plan would inhibit states from having the right to seize family homes of recently deceased Medicaid beneficiaries to restore funding for Medicaid. In other words, and let me explain this, because having been, I am also of the sandwich generation, and with, you know, I don't want to get too deep into the specifics about this, but my mother needed home care, and it's incredibly expensive. At the 20 hours a week is basically, you know, where it starts. as things progress in a more difficult situation, sometimes you need 24-hour care depending on what's going on with them. But 20 hours a week allows the most sort of like, things like bathing, can coming in and out of a shower or a tub, somebody fractures a hip, that completely changes the trajectory of their care needs. And what happens now in many states, you need to be basically completely broke of assets if you are to move into a nursing home and have Medicaid pick up that billing. So supporting home health care, A, puts off having to get into a home, B, allows the maintenance of assets. In our instance, well, we had to take out a loan. We had to buy my mom's apartment so that she would have money to pay for home health care. That all had to be spent down before she could go into a facility for Medicaid to pick it up. Many times what will happen is Medicaid will claw back assets like an apartment in this instance. I mean, we were aware of this. This is why we had to do it this way. And make it impossible for those folks to give anything to their kids when they pass away, to leave anything, or to even have anything more than, like, sometimes in some instances, more than $2,000. So you can't even subsidize their care when they're in a facility with any of their remaining assets, because it's all going to go into Medicaid. So this is a big deal. And for people who are in their 30s, who start to see this on the horizon, 40s and 50s, who are starting to like really have to deal with this into their 60s with their parents, this is a massive, massive big deal. If you've been through this process, you understand that. And it's sort of shocking in a way that we're not hearing more about it from the campaign. Wow. Now, maybe we are, maybe they are on the ground in the speeches or whatnot. I don't know. And it's also sort of amazing to me that we're not hearing more about it from the press. Like we see, like here, put up that clip, that headlines. This is sort of amazing. From
the
without
Times.
a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. Harris has been running sort of a do no harm campaign, but there are actual policies that are being put out. I mean, The View is not like,
yeah, right. So this is how the Times framed it
than our show. Yeah.
Do you want me to read this, Sam?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, I can.
So okay, yeah. In interviews, Kamala Harris continues to bob and weave. Is the New York Times' analysis of it, and then below it, in remarks about migrants, Donald Trump invoked his long-held fascination with genes and genetics. That's the way that they're framing these things. I mean, remember back when she launched and she actually was running more prior to the convention, a campaign that was directed towards the base, and she was talking about price gouging, and she was talking about these other policies that we like that she's de-emphasized as she's been trying to court disaffected Republicans. The Times was saying, like, still no substance from Kamala Harris after Donald Trump did a freaking press conference with a bunch of grocery items next to it and said nothing about his ideas for the country. It's just bizarre.
We talk about the media real quick. That question of like, can we afford this? How about we look at the first female president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, whose number one agenda coming this October. One of the central health-related initiatives Sheinbaum announced is a new door-to-door healthcare program for senior citizens set to launch in October 2024. The program will involve public servants visiting the homes of elderly residents across Mexico. Support this effort. Sheinbaum committed to hiring over 20,000 healthcare professionals, going to door, asking, checking, doing checkups. And that's Mexico can do that. America could do something like that too.
All right, folks, let's take just a quick break. I'm going to adjust the camera, and in a moment, I'm going to be talking to Jeff Gaddy, an attorney with Levin Papantonio, about these what we've seen in terms of social media lawsuits and what we're going to see in the near future, because things are starting to change. We'll be right back after this. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. I am in Las Vegas at the Mass Torts Conference 2024 in the Bellagio Hotel. I'm sitting now with attorney Jeff Gaddy. He is from Levin Papantonio firm. And Jeff, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
About a week or two ago, there was a big case dealing with TikTok. It involved a lawsuit from parents whose child, I think she was like 11 or 14. I can't remember the age. She had seen this sort of like TikTok meme or thing that had been going around about essentially suffocating yourself. And she did it. She died. And I think for what constitutes the first time, and you correct me if I'm wrong, a social media company was responsible for something that they didn't post, right? They just allowed it to be posted. Despite the fact that Section 230 exists, which ostensibly shields them from liability for what users produce. Tell me your thoughts on that case, but first let's start with the case that you're involved in this multi-district litigation.
Sure. So my firm represents hundreds of individuals who have been harmed by their addiction to social media, and by these social media platforms, whether it's Meta, which obviously owns Facebook and Instagram, Snap, which owns Snapchat, Google, which owns YouTube, or ByteDance, which is TikTok. All of these companies have designed their platforms in a way to be addictive, and to maximize the amount of time that children spend on these platforms. And unfortunately, just like our politicians, some of them at least, they've realized that divisive content and harmful content drives engagement. And that's what these companies have been pushing. The case you reference is what we call challenge material. We often see it on these social media platforms, and we found that some of these social media platforms push challenges as part of their brand, because they know it drives engagement, and they know that children react to that, and they like the feedback loop, and they like the engagement that they get from that. And so I think we are seeing a turning of the tide. You're right that these platforms have always pointed to Section 230 and said that gives them blanket immunity. No more. Courts around the country are making clear that they are being held responsible for the design and the development of their platform, not the content. And it's the design and the development of their platforms, and the way that they write and create their algorithms to push this harmful content, this harmful addictive content to children, is what they're being held accountable for.
So there really is almost like two tracks in which these social media outlets are being held responsible. One is that's sort of like almost a direct assault on Section 230. And it sounds like your multi-district litigation sort of slides alongside of Section 230 and says, okay, you can say that you are not held liable for the specifics of the content, but you're talking about the delivery mechanism, which is their product, right? I mean, this sounds more like a product liability case on some level.
Yeah, in a lot of ways it is. It exactly is. And it's a failure to warn case, because these companies know what they're doing. What I think is one of the most compelling aspects about this litigation is it's not a bunch of lawyers saying that they did bad things and that it's causing bad problems. These companies studied it themselves. The whistleblower from Meta came out with the documents showing that Meta had done their own studies, and that Instagram was harming young girls in particular, and that up to 17% of girls were developing worsening eating disorders after spending time on Instagram. Up to a third of girls were feeling worse about the way their bodies looked after being on Instagram. And what they did was take that report and put it in a drawer, and they didn't react to it. And so I think it's compelling that it's these companies' own studies, their own data, their own analysis that's led them to these conclusions. And instead of fixing the problem, they've made it worse, and they've exacerbated it by continuing to allow this addictive, harmful content get out. Because look, their business model is engagement. I mean, these companies primarily make their money off of advertising revenue, and they know that therefore they're incentivized to keep eyes on the product as long as possible.
What's fascinating to me about this, and it came up in that TikTok case, which I know is sort of like a slightly different, but not necessarily, right? I mean, because that TikTok case was about how their product was serving up dangerous material, essentially, in these challenge cases. But the court in that case found that because the Supreme Court had found in a separate case about censorship, where a couple of states wanted to sort of inhibit, I think it was Twitter or TikTok's ability to present or to censor, I guess, so-called misinformation, the Supreme Court said that would be infringement upon speech. Then the lower court said, well, okay, now that we've established that what these social media platforms do is their own speech, suddenly then they don't get liability protection from 230, which is supposedly protects them from liability from other people's speech that just shows up on their platform. So they get sort of jammed in there, didn't they?
You're exactly right. So there's really three buckets here, right? There's true third-party content, which is what Section 230 speaks to. Then you have the platform's own independent content. They have no protection from that under Section 230. Section 230 does not immunize them whatsoever from their own content that they push out to children. And then the third bucket would be the design and development of their own platforms. What we saw the court do in the multi-district litigation out in Oakland, California, was do a feature-by-feature analysis of these different platforms and look at the different components of these platforms and decide, does 230 protect certain features? And for example, one is age verification. None of these companies require parental consent until they allow children to sign up on the platforms. Every one of these companies has the ability to do a better job of making sure that children are not getting on their platforms. As I've mentioned earlier, it's not just us saying this. Some of these companies did their own studies and realized that there are scores of children under the age of 13 on these platforms when they're not supposed to be under the own terms of services of these platforms. But yet they allow it because, again, eyes on the platform is what drives the revenue for them. And so you're right. There's three buckets, and it's the addictive design that's pushing this harmful content that's really moving the needle. Let me give you one more example. There's a case going on in Georgia right now against Snapchat. And what's at issue there is a feature that Snapchat used to have called the speed filter. I don't know if you've heard about this.
No.
This is where children could ride around in a car, and it would tell them the speed that they were going, and it would broadcast it out to all of their friends.
Oh, geez.
And so, as you can imagine, what that led to was children getting in the car and trying to hit 100, 110, 120 miles per hour. And sure enough, in one tragic incident in Georgia, some boys were doing that, and they crashed into another car, caused traumatic brain injury, put somebody into intensive care. And that case is moving along. And Snapchat tried to have that thrown out under Section 230 and saying, hey, that's that independent content of this third party that's broadcasting what they're doing. And the court there says, no, this is the feature of your platform that you made available that caused this harm.
So I'm curious about bucket number two, right? Because bucket number one, and it's easiest for me, as an old person to contemplate this in the context of blogs, right? Because back in the old days, I'd write a blog post, let's say, and I could say something. I'm liable for that. But then we have comments, and the comments get stacked up. They're just one after another. There's no other sort of like bells or whistles about it. I'm not responsible for what people say in the comments. But social media then has like these algorithms that feed highlight certain comments, fill your feed with it, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the sort of like the structure of what they're doing. And they know why they're doing this. They have that research. The middle thing where like the content that they create, like how do we define that? Because if we have if I put a border around one of the blog comments to highlight it, I don't change what's in there. Someone else put it up there, but I put a border around it to emphasize it. Am I now responsible for that content because I have created a derivative product out of it in some way?
Look, I think arguably so, because you've now done something to augment something that was there by a third party, and you've highlighted and emphasized it. Look, when I've started digging into the Section 230 stuff, a couple of statistics really jumped out at me. As you know, this law became law in 1996.
Yep.
When
the
they were
Telecommunications Act.
Yeah. When the Communication Decency Act, when they were debating and drafting this law in 1995, over half of the U.S. senators didn't have internet connection. Only a quarter.
Well, then, if I recall correctly, it was just a series of tubes.
Yeah, exactly right. The information superhighway, correct? So, yeah, only a quarter of the House of Representatives had email accounts. So you had a bunch of guys, mostly guys, and some women who were drafting this law who hadn't even heard the ubiquitous "You've Got Mail" before, and obviously Congress had no idea about the advent of the internet and the algorithms that would be pushing this content to children these days. And so you're right. You really have to get into the weeds and examine each of these different features and components of these platforms on a feature by feature basis, and see whether or not what we're talking about falls into one of those three buckets. And if it's true third-party content, that's not what the lawsuits are about. It's about the design and the development of these addictive platforms that are pushing this harmful content to children.
And we should be clear that at the end of the day, all of this is about making money in profit for these companies, right? I mean, because that's the reason why they have these algorithms. It increases their profit margin. Now, of course, they could also be hiring an army of people to sort of moderate this stuff and to sort of like check and see if it's problematic. But in some instances, they already know it's problematic, and they don't want to have a sort of trail of evidence that they knew it was problematic.
100%.
And they want to save on labor costs too. So it's sort of a win-win for them and a lose-lose for everybody else.
Yeah, it really is. And again, this is stuff that the whistleblower who came out years ago, it made this very clear that these companies know that if they make these corrections that we're demanding they make, it's going to drive down engagement. And if you drive down engagement, you drive down revenue. And that is, it's not their business model. And so until we continue to pursue these cases and continue to hold them accountable, I think that's the only way we're going to see real change. We can all sit back and continue to hope that Congress will act, but we all know how that's gone for the last several years. While we've seen hearing after hearing, a dramatic hearing several months ago when Mark Zuckerberg turned around and apologized to a group of parents that were there in the galley who had lost children to social media addiction and self-harm. And we've seen dramatic moments in Congress, but we haven't seen results yet. So we think civil litigation is the way to hold these companies accountable.
Is there, are we sort of like, it feels like there's almost like a game of chicken that's going on between those who want to hold these social media companies accountable and the social media's claims of like, we don't want to be censored, because you can't say we're being censored if you're also claiming we're also not publishing anything, right? Like censorship is not about like you can't make that claim that your First Amendment rights are being infringed if you're also claiming that it's not my speech.
Yeah, and look, what makes it a game changer to me is our litigation. We're talking about children,
right?
What we're not talking about folks like you and I. We're talking about children who have undeveloped brains and who are being pushed this content by the very most sophisticated software developers in the world, who are trained to get them addicted to these products and keep them addicted to these products and keep them online. And so that's when you talk about the game of chicken and the different competing interests. And to me, when you're talking about children, all that other stuff just goes out the window, and we got to make some changes.
Yes. And I guess this may be outside of like your portfolio, as it were, at this point, because you're working on this specific case, but I can't help but hear echoes of where we went with tobacco litigation, which of course, the Levin firm was integral part of, but we didn't sell tobacco to kids under the age of 18. We had restrictions on that. And then ultimately, I mean, decades later, we understood that for the same reason why we had to protect kids, ultimately we had to sort of like protect broader society. I know that's not the intention of this suit, and it's, outside of the scope of you're servicing your clients. But in some way, like, do you have a sense of where ultimately change is coming, like with a broader understanding of this? Social media is, can be problematic too. And people like to have a drink, but it also can be problematic down the road. We have restrictions on it.
Totally understand. The first thing I'll say is, look, our clients want to see change too. So do they want to be treated fairly for the harm that's been caused to them? Of course, but they want to see change also. I'll give you a couple of comparisons. You're right. When the attorneys generals filed their case last year against Meta, just this week, they filed about 17 of the attorneys generals filed against TikTok. Similar claims. I wouldn't be surprised to see more suits in the coming weeks or months against some of the other platforms. When they announced those lawsuits, they likened these cases to tobacco and also to opioids that we've seen devastate the lives of so many people. The industry that I think big tech is most similarly situated to right now is the pharmacy benefit managers, who I know you've talked about before on the show, and some of the basically acting as the middleman, and everybody's trying to looking around, figuring out what do these guys really do, and what do they really add to the equation here. And there's litigation over insulin price fixing and those types of things that, and there's also bipartisan agreement that something needs to be done about both the big tech industry and the PBM industry. So I kind of, those are a couple of comparisons that jump out to me when I look at these industries. And so look, like I said, we hope that Congress will act. We hope that these companies will take some accountability and make some changes on their own. But until they get it right, we're going to keep pressing on.
Taking even a step further back, because I know you have colleagues who are working on the insulin price fixing and the PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers are, and they're complaining about it. They're under assault really from sort of like both the civil litigation front, or the private, I guess, litigation front from plaintiffs' attorneys in regards to like price fixing and other matters. And on the other side, like the FTC and Lena Khan and the DOJ is starting to look around, and everybody's asking like, wait a second.
Well, what happened is they figured out the emperor has no clothes, and they've been exposed, and that's why it's continuing the way it is.
What's the role of plaintiff attorney in this, right? Because, I have always, in the years I've been coming here and interviewing, trial lawyers, I've likened it almost to like, when in the old Western movies where the sheriff says like, I need some deputies. I'm going to deputize this posse and go out and do it. And this augments the lack of infrastructure sometimes by government regulatory agencies or attorney generals, either state or federal. And how much does like the work that you guys do, this is a more broad question than just the social media, end up providing sort of like both stuff from discovery, I guess, but also just more broadly in terms of like a new understanding of what's going on within an industry that ends up leading to statutory changes that in some way, sort of you catch in the car on some level, but for the betterment of society.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on what you just said, I mean, about a vehicle, one of the reasons there's seatbelts in cars. Government is not efficient and does not act quickly. And I was very involved in the opioid litigation. And the first day we were in court, Judge Polster, who ran that case, commented that this is a problem that should be solved by the legislature and should be solved by the executive branch, but they failed. And so the judiciary now had to get involved. And we did that and had the ability to hold these companies accountable because their lobbying dollars don't work on us. And so we're able to go toe to toe with these companies and bring about real change. And we're very proud of the fact that in opiates, we've recovered over $60 billion for states and local governments across the country to help address the harm from opiates. But on top of that, there's been real injunctive change too. These companies have had to change the way they do business. They've had to stop marketing directly to consumers for opioids. They've had to correct some of the misstatements that they'd made previously about what they claimed was the non-addictive nature of these drugs. So yes, the civil justice is something that we pursue daily, and that we're very proud of the impact that we've made on society and will continue to make when we take on these big issues.
What are the damages that in your social media case, what are the damages that your plaintiffs are seeking? And like what and how does it work? Like the idea with a mass tort as opposed to a class action is that the defendant has taken certain actions that has had disparate impact on the plaintiffs. Is that it?
Right. Yeah, it's very different than a class action. Class action, I always kind of liken to getting a cable bill that's got a bogus $12 charge on it every month. And so everybody's got the same bad action. Everybody's got the same damages. As you said, in the mass tort world, same bad conduct, but it impacts different people in different ways. There's two types of plaintiffs in these cases. One are the individuals plaintiffs who are receiving treatment. Whether it's physical treatment, some of these children unfortunately have harmed themselves. The most tragic cases, children have taken their own lives. We have children who have developed eating disorders based on their addiction to these social media platforms and the way those platforms were designed to push anorexic and bulimic type content towards them. And so those are the types of damages that we'll be pursuing in those cases to make them whole, to pay for the treatment they've had to receive and make them whole after this harm that's happened to them. The other group of plaintiffs are school districts who have had to take on the expense of bringing on additional resources to deal with the harms that come into our schools from social media, from the TikTok dances that happen in the bathroom mirror, to adding counselors and the like, to deal with the additional trauma that some of these children are experiencing. And so that's how we're going about it. In those cases, we're looking to recover dollars for the school districts because they shouldn't be the ones paying to clean up for this mess that these companies have caused. And that's where we're headed.
Jeff Gaddy, thanks so much for your time today, Levin Papantonio, and we'll be following this and see you hopefully maybe in April and get a sense of where these cases are progressing to. And I imagine there'll be more plaintiffs added as the awareness of these cases grow. Yeah,
there's more cases being filed every day.
Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break and let's see if I can do this. There, I'm back. Let's just bring Emma in, and we don't need to do a break. We'll just keep going forward. Thanks again, Jeff Gaddy. I am reminded one time I was at this conference, and one of the guys that spoke came up and talked about a story of suing New York City. And the reason why, if you ever go by a playground in New York City now, you will see there are rubber mats on the ground, is because of one of the lawyers here had a case, I think it was like 30 years ago in New York City, where a child was hurt on the playground. And there was some compensation involved, but ultimately also big part of the ruling was the city needs to take more care in taking kids care, making sure that the playgrounds are safe, which is, an obvious thing that you would imagine. I mean, if you had,
they're woke.
It's super woke. When I was a kid, what we would do is the city would actually have shards of glass that they would glue to the jungle gym. And so if you could, it built character and, you know, the little callus on your hands. But no, it's like, you know, and it was fascinating because, you know, I've had 2 kids now who've gone through the playground circuit. And when they fall, they land on rubber and they don't, more often than not, sustain the type of injuries it used to be when it was just cement. And it's that type of change, reform that a lot of these folks drive. Later in the show, in about half an hour, we'll have some more another attorney on to talk about this new class of drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy and what some of the side effects that aren't being talked about are. Let's do this number 20, shall we? I don't know where you want to go after that. You got the list there, but
yeah. Oh, okay. 20's in our chat. Yeah, sure.
So set this up for us, Emma.
So last night, Carrie Lake and Ruben Gallego, who are both of them are running to be the next senator from Arizona. We know that Kirsten
It's such a breath of fresh air. We don't have to talk about Kirsten Sinema anymore.
I know, it's so nice. And you don't even know how to say her name right, and it doesn't even matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
In her private life now that she's going to be an ex-senator, she's going to revert to Kirsten. What is
I think whenever she gets like her corporate lobbying gig, or if she gets hired by the Chamber of Commerce or something like that, that's where she'll return to her roots. But Gallego is polling double-digit leads consistently against Carrie Lake, in part because she ran for governor and lost, and then refused to concede that she lost. She's a MAGA Republican through and through. So here they are last night at the debate talking about a living wage. And Lake's answer is just not true.
State of Arizona, who regardless of the stock market going up or unemployment being low, they're wondering, they're struggling right now. They have to work 2 jobs. They're not sure what to do. But what does a living wage look like to you? And how, as a senator, would you help people in Arizona get to a point where they could afford housing? They don't feel like they're up against the wall every month.
I'm so glad you're asking these questions, because this is the #1 issue for Arizonans. There's so many big problems right now, but people are struggling. I was talking to a woman in the West Valley, and she'll remember the conversation we had. She talked about how she volunteers, and she's volunteered for decades at the food bank, even giving food, volunteering her time. And she said, for the first time in my life, I've had to go to that food bank and ask for help because I don't have enough money to get through the end of the week. And so we have to do something. And it starts with bringing down the cost of everything. The cost of everything. We have been affected most, especially in Ruben Gallego's district, with inflation. Housing prices are on the rise. They've gone up 35%. I talked about when I first moved here and bought a house, a 3-bedroom house for $88,000. It's not affordable. And it goes right back to the American Rescue Act.
If inflation is especially high in Ruben Gallego's district, then maybe whatever she's about to claim is driving the inflation is not the case. Like, if inflation can be that isolated that just the economy of a single congressional district is fundamentally different from somewhere else, maybe there's a different dynamic that's going on there. Now, home prices are high. I mean, you could have more inflation within a district in home prices and in rent because you have a limited amount of housing stock and a limited amount of real estate in which to put it. In which case you would need a federal bill to build more housing, maybe.
Which Harris has proposed, by the way. I mean,
100%.
Not fully to my liking in terms of, like, it's not just a supply issue. She does say she'll take on gouging from corporate landlords, but that's a little more vague. However, we know which side has an actual housing plan and which doesn't. J.D. Vance just went on the stage in his VP debate and was like, oh, well, maybe we should just, like, sell federal land.
That's not going to solve the problem.
Right.
Live in Yellowstone.
But exactly. But the things like the DOJ suit against Real Page, is it?
Real Page, yeah.
That is basically a price fixing operation on rent, is going to help. We need more federal dollars. But I assume that's what she's going to suggest next. Or is like somehow magically food in Gallego's district is more expensive than in other districts. But go ahead.
They've gone up 35%. I talked about when I first moved here and bought a house, a 3-bedroom house for $88,000. It's not affordable. And it goes right back to the American Rescue Act, the American Rescue Plan, which was anything but a rescue. It actually sent us spiraling and put our economy on life support. Obama and Obama's Treasury Secretary warned Ruben Gallego and the Democrats, do not sign this piece of legislation into
Larry
law,
Summers piece
or
of
it
garbage.
will send inflation skyrocketing up. That's exactly what they did. They did not heed the warning. They signed it into law, and that's why the price of everything has gone up. The price of eggs up over 100%. The average monthly mortgage payment has gone up 105% here in Arizona. And we have 3 cities that actually have the highest jump in rent payments every single month, and that's Tucson, Mesa, and Phoenix. So one of the things I want to do is secure the border. When you have 20 million people and we're competing for goods and services with people, it's a basic supply and demand. But we also have to work to bring down the cost of everything, and we have to make sure that we're not printing money and bringing inflation up. There's only one entity that can create inflation. That is the government. They have pushed for more spending, more spending, more spending, and that means more printing of money. And that's why your dollar is only worth 75 cents today. It was worth $1 under President Trump. It's only 75 cents under Kamala Harris.
1 minute to respond. How do you make living more affordable for your constituents?
Well, first of all, the minimum wage should be $15, and it should be pegged to inflation, so it actually keeps moving up. Number 2, you fight inflation by actually looking at how you can bring down costs. Number 1, we have a big opportunity right now. We need to stop the merger of the grocery stores in Arizona.
There we go.
By allowing Kroger and Albertsons to merge, they're going to have 70% of all grocery store controlling customers. That'll raise prices. And we already saw a lot of the grocery stores already gouging our consumers. Carrie Lake, by the way, went on record and says she didn't think there was any gouging of consumers at grocery stores, even though executives from these grocery stores under oath said they did do it. But we also need to continue doing some of the things that we have done. We've passed legislation that mandates that our government negotiates the prices of prescription drugs. We've capped insulin at $35. Next year's seniors, they're going to have their prescription drugs capped at a total of $2,000. That's the kind of stuff we're going to do. And then we have to make sure we fight these big corporations that are taking up 1/3 of all the homes recently. And by the way, Carrie Lake wants to allow them to keep buying those homes, and then now she's going to give them a tax cut next year.
All right, I need each of you a 30-second answer on this.
Did she respond, or was it more just garbage?
No, I think this is a different question. The interesting thing that strikes me on this too is that again, you have somebody out there running a Senate campaign addressing the issue of inflation, which is one of the big Republican talking points. And the first thing he addresses it with, and mind you, he is outperforming Kamala Harris, at least in the context of the polls in Arizona. He comes in with antitrust. He basically is talking about what Lena Khan and the FTC is doing.
But that gives me hope, Sam. Like he's not running a left-wing campaign. He's actually running extremely right on the border. And that has been, I think, in part informing the National Democratic Party's strategy. But I mean, obviously, I wish that they were a little bit more, they were building towards something broader. But the fact that even Gallego, who's really running a pretty centrist Democratic campaign, is touting the Kroger's antitrust lawsuit from Lena Khan should be a red flashing light to all the people in the Kamala Harris campaign, or at the very least, like some of the forces that want to oust Lena Khan. Let's not do it, because it's in the interest. Maybe it's not in the interest of her getting donations on her quest to win the presidential race to tout that she's going to keep Lena Khan. But if she actually does win, it's definitely in her interest, in my view, to keep Khan on.
Oh, as a policy matter, without a doubt, it really is just going to be a question of how much, who she has surrounded, or who she will have surrounded, or who she will surround herself with, and what they're going to suggest. I mean, you just heard Carrie Lake cite Larry Summers, a vampire from the Clinton years, and one who Biden specifically kept out of the administration because of stuff like that, frankly. And he sat on the sidelines, basically slagging things like the American Rescue Act, et cetera, et cetera. And let's be clear. I mean, there is no doubt that structurally our economy is a problem. Like, we have a structural problem that when our economy is successful, we still are leaving far too many people behind. And that's a structural problem. But within the apples to apples comparison of our structural problems that have, existed, certainly it's been even worse, I think, in many respects since the 70s. But apples to apples, our economy is performing so much better relative to just about every other economy in the world in the wake of COVID. It's not even close. And the rebound from COVID relative, as measured against how successful other countries have been relative to the financial crisis, for instance, has been dramatic. We did not recover as a country from the financial crisis because folks like Larry Summers in the Obama administration were like, you can't spend $1 trillion. Let's do $750 billion, big bailout, half of which is tax cuts. And there was just simply not enough money put into the economy to do things like drive new housing. And what happens in the wake of that is, if you're not building new housing because people don't have any money, because the government's not putting money in there into the economy, or into the, I guess, the private sector, I should say, then people start leaving the construction industries. Because I can't get work. I haven't had work for 6 months. I'm done being a carpenter's apprentice, or I'm done being a carpenter, or I'm done being an electrician, or I'm done, my plans for, an excavation company, whatever it was, I'm going to go do something else. And so then when this huge need for housing happens, the economy takes a long time. We don't get to real employment. I mean, real, decent employment numbers for nearly a decade after Obama, or I should say after the financial crisis. And then when housing starts becoming a problem, there's nobody around to build them.
Yeah. And
because people have left that industry.
And I will also say, it's in part because of years and decades of just completely handing housing, shelter, which should be a human right, over purely to private industry. I mean, since the Clinton years, there's been a federal bar via the Faircloth Amendment on funding federally public housing. If the government was more interested in providing that, then perhaps they would have to compete in the same logic that applies to allowing Medicare to negotiate drug prices. If there was some sort of public, more public housing that the federal government subsidized to keep costs down, then these private price gouging real estate associations, or the Real Page or whatever, that are fixing rent prices, they would have to contend with that. But that's a massive problem. And that's the other thing about some of this lack of focus on the popular elements of Harris's campaign to start out. It's just maddening to me, because housing is really, I think, a big reason why people are like, hey, all these economic indicators may say the economy is doing really well, but I'm not feeling it. That's in part because we need to drive down the cost of housing, and the Democrats would do a better job of that, and that's in her platform, but it hasn't been emphasized as much recently.
I mean, the whole campaign has been strange to me. Now, that's not to say they may know better.
Yeah.
But you can have an opinion on it, because we know what the experts also knew better in 2016 until they didn't. And so one side of this one of these campaigns is going to lose. And it's either going to be the Trump campaign or it's going to be the Harris campaign. And it's
the sad
quite
thing
clear.
is the people being courted are good either way. Frankly, it's going to be the people who aren't so well off that and are kind of being taken for granted that are going to pay the price if Trump wins again.
Right. I mean, to be fair, on both sides, right? You could be excited that finally your Trump is in charge of the weather machine, but if you are if you need services. If you're living in Florida and Trump essentially decides to get rid of the hurricane warning system from the National Oceanographic, from the governmental agencies that warn people and basically sell it off to the highest bidder, those same Trump voters who are not making any money and don't have the ability to pay for updates on what's happening with the hurricane. I mean, this is there is a very much a heads we win, tails you lose dynamic to this. But I should just say, like in terms of the campaign, I will concede that they may be right, but I also worry that they are wrong. I mean, I get it. I think it's absolutely necessary for Kamala Harris to win for the sake of future progressive and leftist policies, not necessarily even under her, but to essentially allow to set some type of like floor for where we start to debate. Well, and then, of course, the Supreme Court and the entire federal judiciary. Right now, as we speak, Republicans are suing the federal government to try and unwind the DACA program. And DACA is basically just the federal government saying we have higher priorities than to use our resources to deport children who were brought to this country by their parents without any, obviously they're children. They don't have any agency in that instance, and they would get a protected status so they can actually, and there's requirements. I mean, you have to, it's a little bit, it's not hugely onerous, but it's somewhat onerous. Republicans are now suing in the Fifth Circuit. The Fifth Circuit is where anything decent goes to be shot, essentially. The Fifth Circuit is Texas, Louisiana, and Oklahoma, but nevertheless, all these cases take place in Texas. These judges are all the Trumpiest and right-wingiest of judges, and you're going to see them attack the ability of the administration to specifically provide this protection under DACA. And then who knows? Maybe it goes to the Supreme Court, and we find out where the Supreme Court stands on this. But the courts alone are sufficient. I worry about how Harris is campaigning.
I know
is an image of how she's going to govern. But I've seen it go both ways.
This is the thing is like
I was worried about Biden, and
me too.
I also thought maybe. And he turned out to be, at least domestically, great in many respects.
And he ran more conservatively than Obama did, and he had more progressive domestic agenda.
There's some countervailing factors on that, though, because how did they win Georgia? What was the key campaign issue in Georgia at the time? Is those senators and the checks for people
$1,400 or $2,000.
Yeah. So I mean, my point really is like what's interesting is listening to Harris over the past few months, even on an issue that she shined on abortion, like in the debate on Howard Stern, she's doing Biden's framing now. I was listening to that. She's going, it's an individual right, it's a freedom. I mean, we just have to be conscious of the fact that the entire campaign staff, for the most part, is still Biden's people. And all the metrics that they're looking at in terms of the voters that they are going to target, it's the same thing. They have all this data, millions of dollars that pours into this kind of modeling. So they're using the same stuff. I'm not putting a ton of stock into how the campaign is being run fully. You just have they're trying to win, and that's the case. And they're basing it off models, and it makes us feel shaky. I agree, but I don't think 2016 is the right comparison. I think it's more like 2012. And the thing that also gives me hope about it is that when you poll independents and the general public, she's viewed as the change candidate every time, and that's usually a pretty good indication of like what the momentum looks like. Although it's been a pretty rough few weeks. But I also assess it as a pretty rough few weeks because it's not my politics. So I'm trying also to
it's tough to measure, right?
And I think that our perception of where undecideds are politically, it's just not exactly where the country is, and where they are politically is maybe not fully where we would want them to be. And a lot of this is about squishiness about a woman being president and her trying to act tough like a cop. So she's out there, she's like never laughing, wearing that gray suit all the time. I've got a Glock. I've prosecuted transnational criminal organizations. I understand the logic of that. I think you could be a little bit more multifaceted, to be honest with you, because it comes off very inauthentic as well. So
to us. Who knows how it comes off to other people?
I mean, they're trying to land the plane. I think that there's a lot of stuff that makes sense in the way that they're campaigning, but we have to remember we were in a really, really tough spot with Biden. Virginia was in play.
No.
I mean,
definitely upgrade. Yeah.
But it is a bit of a bummer because this momentum could have been seized in a different way, and it just seems like they're going with the absolute safest strategy possible.
And I will say, Matt, that I think there's no doubt the promise of checks helped with winning the Senate in Georgia, right? I mean, those two races, they were both runoffs, I guess. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that codes to people as being a progressive policy. And, I mean, and I think that's in many respects, the fault of the people who have, there was not enough done to sort of like contextualize all the good things that happened from the American Rescue Plan nor the IRA for that matter. I mean, there were attempts to do it. People are very cynical about it. But, George W. Bush sent out checks.
Right. The first checks came out under Trump too. I mean, so.
Yeah. Remember he wanted to sign them.
Yeah.
It's not the treasurer. He wanted to have him like stamped like his watches.
Pelosi, I mean, give her credit, she was also key to that too, the checks.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. All right. But I guess my point is that like when you go into Georgia and you promise checks, I don't know that people necessarily perceive that as like this is a progressive agenda. It's a good one. But I don't know if they perceive that. It's just like, all right, well, once Biden had already won, you needed a Democratic Senate to deliver those checks, right? I mean, it was more, you don't even necessarily have to trust us, but we just need a unified, government to actually execute this. If you elect, I can't even remember her name now. The senator from Georgia.
Oh, Loeffler.
Right, yeah. Kelly Loeffler.
If you elect Loeffler, you will not get the checks. As simple as that, because
also,
Donald Trump's not the president.
Herschel Walker was an insane person, I think that helped the situation. I forgot about that. I mean, but that's also a mirror of a little bit of what the Democrats are trying to replicate in 2024. They had success with it in Georgia in 2020. They had success in 2022. The model seemed to suggest they can have success with it in this election too.
Let's play this clip since we're talking about policy. Here's Donald Trump weighing in on policy on Newsmax with an interesting theory about how you can fund government. I don't know if he's coming out for MMT here or just simply say like, I have a different way. We sell watches.
Blame always seems to go on her end to corporate price fixing and vilifying the corporations in this country, the companies in this country. When asked how she's going to pay for the agenda last night on 60 Minutes, she just keeps saying she's going to tax the rich. Even Bill Whitaker on 60 Minutes is saying, well, we live in the real world. How are you really going to do that?
Well, you don't tax the rich because the rich are going to look. The rich pay most of the tax in the country. First of all, people hate to say it; they hate to hear it. But you take a certain very small percentage, and most of the tax is paid by the rich. But the problem that she has is she's going to the communist method. Take all incentive, and you know what the rich do and the corporations do? They leave the country and they go to another country that's more friendly from a tax standpoint and other standpoints like a regulation standpoint. Her agenda will bring us in to a 1929 style depression, and it's guaranteed. She has no idea what
blame always.
He's so obsessed with the turn of the 20th century. He's been saying over and over that he's William McKinley, which, I think historians actually might agree in terms of his tariff proposal, but it also ushered in the Gilded Age, which also then led to the Great Depression.
Yeah, the very height of the Gilded Age, like he's talking about.
I read the back of a book on early 20th century history, and I haven't gotten to that part yet. So I will be getting there.
He picked the least interesting candidate to have a spiritual connection with who was assassinated, or president. He could have been JFK or Abe Lincoln, but no, he's William McKinley.
It's because that's what he grew up thinking about. As a child, his parents would probably tell him, "Man, the Gilded Age was really great."
Oh yeah, I mean he's essentially Mr. Magoo, but as a presidential candidate.
I just wanted to just address two of the things that he said here, so that just doing our due diligence. First off, it is the case that the rich pay more of the taxes in the country, but they do not pay commensurate with the amount of wealth they have. They control such an enormous amount of the country's wealth. And you go where the money is. And we should also say, just as a sheer numbers game, that's the reality of it. As for a fairness question, the people who have benefited the most from society, owe more to that society, B, have probably benefited more with a combination of luck and the fact that it's structured towards those people.
Yeah. How lucky is it that all these laws benefit me?
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, whether it was, sort of like vestiges of racism or ongoing racism for that matter. I mean, look, talk about housing, the number one way that intergenerational wealth builds. If you were black in this country, you couldn't get a mortgage. Even frankly, in the lead up to the financial crisis, and I would imagine now we can find evidence of it being more difficult for black people to get mortgages. But certainly it was literally the law perfectly legal to deny certain cohorts of people mortgages and loans or charge higher rates, et cetera, et cetera. So in terms of who you tax, of course you tax the rich. I happen to believe you don't need to use taxation to fund the government, but if we're operating in that world, taxing the rich is no problem. The other thing is that if you're worried about capital flight, then make laws to inhibit capital flight.
Yeah.
Because every one of those billionaires who decides I'm going to live in a better tax haven in wherever it is, I don't know, Dubai or
Canary
Lisbon
Islands.
or
Yeah.
the Canary Islands or in Britain or wherever it is. I don't know where it's most favorable. You simply say, okay, well, incidentally, the homes you own here or the privileges that you're getting from being an American citizen, well, we're going to tax you on that. There are ways of inhibiting capital flight. All right, listen, I got to take a quick break, and in a minute, I'm going to be welcoming to the program another attorney who is working on those GL1 inhibitors, and we'll hear from him in a moment. So let's just take a quick break, and then I'll be right back with that. We're back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. I am broadcasting live from the Bellagio Hotel in the conference room or the exhibitors room of the Mass Torts Conference here in Las Vegas. Joining me now, Cameron Stevenson. He's an attorney with Levin Papantonio.
Yep.
You guys are working on a case involving GLP-1 RA drugs. What did I just say?
It's a class of drug. First of all, good to see you, Sam.
Nice to see you.
Always enjoy being with you. The GLP-1, you want me to just tell you a little bit about the litigation?
Yeah.
So the GLP-1 litigation.
Well, let's start with just what is the GLP-1 drugs?
So it's a class of drugs that were initially designed to help patients lower their A1C, for diabetics. It has expanded for weight loss. So you have patients who are diabetics that are using these drugs to try to help lower their A1C. You have overweight people who are using these drugs to try to lose weight. And then you have a lot of people who are using these drugs off-label for a variety of reasons, which I'd love to get into, for cosmetic weight loss, for things that these drugs were not designed for.
And these drugs are known commercially as.
So you've got two companies. You have Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. So Novo Nordisk is Ozempic, Wegovy, and Rybelsus. And the Eli equivalents are Trulicity, Mounjaro, and the new one is Zepbound.
What's the difference between those? Why does two companies have three of the same drugs? Is it like sort of like GM putting out Buicks and I don't know, and Chevys? Or
I never thought about it that way, but that's a good analysis. They're all designed to do the same thing. Most of them are injections. The newest one is pill form. There are varying degrees of dosing. They're indicated for different things. The newer ones are indicated, approved by the FDA for weight loss. The initial drugs were approved by the FDA specifically to treat diabetes to help lower A1C.
These drugs they seem to be very beneficial for people in terms of like weight loss. My understanding is that too, like there are other sort of like other positives that are associated with it. I don't know if it's like cholesterol or other things.
That's an ongoing thing. I will be the first one to say that these drugs have a place in society. These are good drugs for certain people, and they're helping people. Nobody wants these drugs off the market. The issue that we are suing for is they have side effects, which I'd love to talk with you about, that the company knew about but did not warn. And so, you've got the healthcare community and you've got their patient population that are not able to evaluate and have a candid conversation about the risks and benefits of these drugs. And if you can't do that, then you're not making an informed decision. And so that's what the litigation is about, is you need to warn people about these risks, because many people that are taking these drugs for cosmetic weight loss, even some of these folks that are taking it for weight loss that they need, for health reasons, they need to lose it. And even diabetic patients that are taking these drugs, if they knew about the risks, they may make different decisions and go a different route. And that's what this is all about.
So what are those risks?
Okay.
I guess let's start with that.
So these drugs are designed, the way you lose weight and lower your A1C is they delay gastric emptying. They tell your stomach to slow down the metabolism process, so the food stays in your stomach longer, you feel fuller, and thus you don't want to eat. And it works. These drugs are very good at what they do. The problem is that a statistically significant patient population has what's known as gastroparesis or stomach paralysis. That is something that is way over and above a delay in gastric emptying. You actually have this drug paralyzes your stomach. The food never processes. You could have a bowel obstruction. You could have, permanent nerve injuries in your gastrointestinal tract. So you've got to warn people about this condition. They knew about it whenever they applied for NDAs with the Food and Drug Administration. This is a very bad side effect that's
NDAs?
associated with these new drug applications.
Okay.
But this is a very bad side effect that was known about, but you're not going to sell these drugs. I mean, look at the companies, look at what their market capitalization has done in the last year and a half.
Oh my God,
I mean, it is insane. So if you warn people about gastroparesis, you're going to make a lot of money and you're going to sell, issue a lot of prescriptions, but it ain't going to be the level it's at right now.
So when did they file these NDAs? I mean, these new drug, new drug applications. It sounds too much like a non-disclosure agreement, but these new drug applications.
Right.
Did they file these in the sort of like new era where these drugs are seen as sort of like weight loss inhibitors or
I don't have the dates at my fingertips, but what I can tell you is that the Ozempic was first approved in 2017. The other drugs that we've discussed, came out over the years, a couple of years later.
And they were first approved for treatments of diabetic. For diabetes. Okay.
Correct. Only diabetics. You could only, I guess doctors can, commit malpractice, but the FDA only approved Ozempic for diabetic patients to help them lower their A1C. But what they marketed for, what the company marketed, their direct to consumer marketing and what they told physicians in their detailing is, guess what? This is for diabetics, but wink, wink, it'll help people lose weight.
How do they do? I'm always sort of fascinated by this. How they what this gray area of off-label,
off-label marketing and promotion.
Yeah, like we can see that.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like it's where it's like the classic things like I'm sitting here, I can hear you talk type of thing. Like we can see them market this for off-label. Doesn't the FDA know, like, hey, wait a second, what are you guys doing?
Yeah, and they fine them $25 million, and the company says, here's 50 for the next time. We're going to make hundreds of billions of dollars. Here's your $25 million check for this off-label promotion, and we'll go ahead and give you another 25 for the next time we do it, probably in a couple of months.
Can't the FDA enjoin them?
They can, but I mean, you can say don't do something all day long. You can't. I mean, what does enjoin mean? It's a judge. It's a document that says you're not allowed to do this. I mean,
and so they
violate it.
They'll just say, you and what army?
Yeah, exactly.
We're willing to pay you some money because look, it's business and this is part of our overhead.
Exactly.
But we're going to keep doing this until there becomes greater awareness, at least. And I guess now, I mean, the FDA seems to have they approved it as a weight loss?
Yes, they have for again, it's a specific indication, but the more recent drugs are approved for weight loss, even if you're not a diabetic.
Is there this stomach paralysis? Is it a function of dosage? Like what did these companies, you say they were aware of this problem when they applied for the new drug application, they didn't reveal it.
Right.
Did they reveal it to diabetic patients?
No.
They what do they know, or did they know, or to the extent that you can talk about this?
Well, so what we have basically publicly available information. We have clinical trials. We have various sources of knowledge before the new drug application was filed. What Papantonio taught me, and what we always find out, is when you get in discovery and you get in discovery all of their internal documents, the things that were not given to the FDA, you find smoking guns and a lot of evidence about what they knew and the extent to which they knew it. And that's where the real liability comes. So we are in that process, and we have not found everything that we're going to find, but the things that we have found certainly are concerning.
And so, and you can't obviously be explicit about this because at one point you could theoretically be in trial, and just in a general sense, because this is fascinating too to me.
Understood.
They don't know what you know about their documents, even though they've given them all to you ostensibly, because there's so many, they may not even know what's in those documents.
You know, they've gotten smarter. I think 10 or 20 years ago, people were a little bit more, I guess, loose about the language and the things they said in their emails. So I think that all of these companies, whether it's pharmaceutical companies or medical device companies or whatever, they have internal policies and procedures now, even if they're formal or informal, that kind of say, hey, don't say stupid stuff in an email that could potentially cause us problems down the road. But you can say that all day long. The documents are still going to be there. They just candidly might not be as voluminous as they would be like 10 years ago.
And but when they hand over documents to you guys, I mean, they're giving you millions of documents because this is to some extent a war of attrition. Mm-hmm. They're hoping you run out of resources before you can read every document and sort of piece it together.
Right.
So you don't want to say publicly beforehand, oh, well, here's the trail that we follow, because you don't want them to give a heads up as to how you would go. Is that basically it?
I mean, that's part of it, but you hit the nail on the head, and that's why this takes a team. That's why there are a team of law firms that are in excess of 20 firms that are working on this case, because we all have resources. We all have document reviewers. We review in some fashion every single line of every single document that's produced, and it takes a team.
Do you have a sense of, like, if they were to have disclosed this, I mean, obviously they'd still make a ton of money. I think, who knows, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 people might say, like, I'm willing to risk that because I really need to lose this weight or whatnot.
Right.
But do you have a sense of incidence? So, like, no drug is completely safe. The whole point is,
Sure.
Short of, like, frankly, when you talk about public health and the implications of one person getting sick, and another, I mean,
Right.
So we see that in the context of vaccinations. But when you're talking about individual treatment, again, no drug is completely safe, but the doctor can say to you,
right,
listen, your chances of surviving this operation, for instance, is 75%. But if you don't get the operation, your chances of surviving are 25%. And so you'd say, okay, I'm going to take that risk because the odds are better if I do the operation. I'm just making up these numbers. What do you have a sense of, like, what the risk factor is for that paralysis?
I can't. So I think what you're asking is what percentage of patients that take these drugs will end up with this condition? I think it would be, quite candidly, a little reckless of me to comment on that because it's an evolving thing that we're all still figuring out. But I will say, look, to your point,
you know what happens. You just don't know what the incident rate is.
Correct. But, look, to your point, that's why I said these drugs have a place. I mean, the societal benefit for all people outweighs the risk, or side effect for one person. But that one person has a right to know about the risk so that they can decide whether or not they want to take on that risk to get the benefit of the medication. To kind of piggyback off of that, just based purely on intuition, the heavier a person is, the worse off they are in terms of their diabetic condition. Clearly, the more likely these type of people would be willing to take on the risk of gastroparesis for the benefit of the drug than, say, someone who cosmetically thinks they need to lose 15, 20, or 25 pounds. And that's where there's a gray line. Like, when do you get from someone who really is on this drug that doesn't need it to someone who, needs this drug, or else the health consequences that come along with their obesity and their diabetes will maybe take their life.
Are there any other side effects that, as you comb through the research, and begin to interview doctors and look at surveys and
Yes.
whatnot, are there any other side effects that come up that are and how severe, and B, underreported by the manufacturers?
Yes. So we are evaluating other injuries than just gastrointestinal injuries. But, Sam, you've been doing this long enough, at least had, the exposure to the way these litigations work. These drugs are in their infancy stage in terms of mass patient use. Quite candidly, if we're, 2 or 3 years from now, I sure hope this isn't the case, but maybe gastroparesis is not the worst injury and the worst side effects that these drugs can cause. Maybe there's some latent disease, long-standing cancer correlation. All of these things are just going to have to play out over time. And I certainly hope that's not the case. But I've just seen it too many times over the course of my career where, drugs are not studied well enough before new drug applications are filed. And, we keep talking about, what did the company know that they didn't tell the FDA about? There's also many situations where the company didn't know about it in clinical trials because they didn't do enough. They didn't study it long enough before they filed a new drug application. So,
and that happens because they're in their boardroom going, we need this rolled out by Q1 because my stock vests by then, or our investment bankers are telling us like we need more capital.
Guess what? I mean, look, let me expand it further. This is what really happens. You have competing companies that are all developing these drugs for several years. Whoever gets to the market first is going to be the winner, short term, maybe not long term. Because whoever has in theory, the best product is going to win over time. But the key is to be first, get it out there, make the money, and then, we'll see what bad stuff happens and deal with it as it comes. I mean, it's be first, get the money while you can, get the money before your, patent expires. And all of the generic drug manufacturers can come in and start making, the same drug that you're making. So it's a money thing. That's why they don't study it enough. It's a financial it's a financial reason.
And you've been doing this for a while, and Levin Papantonio was I think one of the lead part of the team in FenFen.
Yes.
Back 25, 30 years ago.
Yes.
What do you see any change, as you talk to some of the other older attorneys too, is there a change? Has the payouts that they've had to done from FenFen? I mean, the idea is you're just raising the cost of them doing business in this way. It's
Right.
really essentially what it's about.
Yep.
They're looking at this, they're going, if we're going to make $1 billion and we got to pay a $50 million fine, great.
Yeah.
We're getting off, but if we've got to pay a $750 million or an $800 million fine, that's a problem. Now that's not being issued by the government.
Right.
That's where the trial attorneys come in. We're going to make you pay this. Has there been a discernible change in behavior within the industry around drugs like these?
This is a difficult issue, and it's a touchy issue for me because this goes to the very heart of why I'm doing what I'm doing. I want to make a difference. I want these companies to do better. I want them to continue to be incentivized to make drugs that help society, but I want them to be studied enough. And I want the side effects, when they are known, to be publicly known, not just privately known.
And we should say the value is not just in the assessment of whether the individual is going to take it. It gives the opportunity for their physician to say, oh, wait a second, this is going south. We need to cease this right away and provide treatment so that you inhibit the risk of long-term injury.
Very good point. Totally agree. And that's super important. And that goes to your issue. I refuse to believe that what I'm doing is not making a difference. I think that we have changed the way that some companies operate, but you know this as much as I do, Sam. We have not stopped, seeing new litigations over the last 15, 20, 25 years. So on the one hand, I believe in what I'm doing and I know that I'm making a difference and I'm proud of what Levin Papantonio does. But somehow we seem to still be in business. So companies are still doing things like this.
Can you measure it within the pharmaceutical silo? Like, I can see maybe other industries, but is there a way to measure it, or is that just too difficult? I mean, you and I are, sort of similarly situated in the sense that, like, I like to think that my show has some impact on, but you may have more tangible results than I do.
Well, I'm sure that there are, ways we can analyze the data. It certainly would provide some output that is beneficial to analyze. But I really couldn't speak to that. I'm sure it's possible, but it's not something that I've really tried to engage.
Cameron Stevenson, thanks so much for the information on this. I imagine we're going to be hearing more about this as this drug becomes more and more ubiquitous. I mean, I really do. I've heard good things about the drug. I've heard that, like, even they're experimenting with, like, microdosing it and whatnot. I've also heard stories of, like, other side effects,
right?
Some of which are not so pretty.
Well, look, Sam, I really appreciate you having me. As we advance this litigation further, let's talk again. I'd like to talk again.
I'd love to do that.
Appreciate it,
Cameron
man.
Stevenson, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. Oh, there we go. All right. Switching back to my Dutch angle shot. There we go. Multiple camera angles here. High-tech operation I am working. This whole camera switching is actually pretty exciting. I didn't realize we could do this. Am I the only one who's excited by it?
No stopping us.
Really.
You can do the Brett Cooper shot.
I mean, I could put up a third camera.
You really could. I mean, honestly.
I could do.
You should get one right behind your head too, so we can see what you're seeing on
Right.
the floor.
That's right. Well, it's pretty crazy around here. Hold on, let me turn this around. All right, we'll do this. Hold on, here we go.
I don't know about you, but this is
there it is.
thrilling. Wow.
Fascinating.
Yep. There we go. All right.
That's great.
Thanks for
That
showing
is
us that.
grade A material, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. Your YouTube and Twitch subscriptions at work.
We'll get the drone for next time.
Exactly. That would actually be pretty funny. Flying a drone around here. That would actually be really fun to do. I don't know what other clip do you want to try and take a phone call?
Sure, we
what
should
do
read some
got going?
IMs probably, right?
Yes. Not a birth person. Sam, I've been on Mounjaro for 6 months now to lower my A1C. My doctor's very clear on the side effects and what I could expect before trying it. But even after talking with her and looking up the side effects online, this is the first I'm hearing about the, I don't think it's bowel paralysis. It's stomach paralysis. Fart wanes. Okay. Beating of fascism. Matt, don't get me too excited about the possibility of some Brett Cooper style episodes.
Gotta work on the lighting too.
Seth P. I'm so curious how much liability over these drugs is leveraged against the makers versus the distributors. Interesting question. I would ask that. That would have been a good question. Hopeful one, anecdotal evidence. Why are you doing this? Why am I doing this? You're suggesting that there's no data. No, he can't provide data, but I can tell you this, the expense associated with bringing these cases is so high that it is very rare that they would go forward and put resources into it unless they don't have data that makes them confident that they're going to be able to prove this. That's just been the case time and time again.
I like the idea that a personal injury is anecdotal. Like, kind of, right? Basically.
I mean, it is anecdotal.
By definition.
And he's not, I mean, I think he was pretty explicit that you can't give a percentage on this. Real human. I recognize that Biden has been better on labor, but every time I hear positive talk about Biden or hope regarding Harris, it strikes me as pretty tone deaf and entitled, juxtaposed to your ongoing and excellent coverage of the genocide in Gaza and the ongoing effects of climate change. The Democratic Party may be the, quote, less bad option on election day, but they are the most effective roadblock that our elite has to fight against an end to imperialism and capitalism. They are not the most effective roadblock. I can assure you that
Trump's administration from
the Trump
2016
administration would be an even better roadblock
and actually benefited them. So yeah, you know, like I mean, how many times are we going to have to?
It's just this is just we're playing one game now. It's the game called Capital, not really, but the game called the general election for president. And I understand what you're saying. The Democratic Party is wildly insufficient. But I still think you can play your heart out at the game that's right in front of us and not wish that we're playing a different game, which, I mean, I don't, but it was the same thing that bothered me about Hillary whining about, you know, oh, I won the popular vote. Well, the rules of the game were you got to win the Electoral College. So play that game and we'll see how things go.
It's easier to say what isn't the vehicle toward delivering us into the future that we all want than saying what is. And is it the Green Party? Let's see what your actual solutions are. Because I think good. I think we overemphasize election day, and the organizing that's done outside of that is vastly more important and leads to the effects that we want on election day. But again, what do you think is the actual solution here?
But I also I take issue with the assertion that they are the most effective roadblock that our elite has to fight against an end to imperialism and capitalism.
That's a Green Party talking point.
I just don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. If we keep electing the Republicans over and over again, the idea that we're going to be closer to an end to an imperialism and capitalism is just bonkers. It is bonkers.
That's what you say if you're a Green Party person.
We have evidence of this over and over again in my lifetime alone. 8 years of Reagan, 4 years followed up with George Herbert Walker Bush. What did it bring us? It brought us a Democratic Party to the right, significantly to the right of where it was 12 years earlier, significantly. And then after 8 years of George W. Bush, where did that bring us? It extended that even and really didn't change until there was a fundamental change on the ground with people that I think was largely associated with the time from the end of so-called end of the Cold War, at least the demise of the Soviet Union. So there is absolutely no evidence. And in fact, it's contrary to all of the experience of the past 60, 70 years that the Democratic Party is the most effective roadblock. No, they're both roadblocks, but one is just bigger and more robust, and we have less power to dismantle it. And that is the Republican Party.
Yeah. I just get impatient with this. Time to deal with reality. I don't understand. We're in a truncated period of time where the election is the conversation, but after election day, we'll be back to work talking about things in a more robust manner about what's possible and how, if Harris gets elected, she can be pushed, how we can push a more progressive agenda with the squad, with other unions, with organizing outside of the situation. But right now, the task at hand is that we have two choices for president. And one of them is terrifying, at least to me, and should be to a lot of people, in the sense that he now has J.D. Vance and Peter Thiel and all these ghouls behind him. He's more emboldened to be anti-democratic. Some of the stuff he's talking about are essentially pogroms. Harris has a lot of problems, but at least she's not frickin' Biden. And that's the reality of the situation. So deal with it or don't. Like, if you don't want to deal with electoral politics, don't deal with electoral politics. But if you want to deal with electoral politics, then engage in the reality of the two choices that we have. And that's it. Like, I have respect for people that have that don't care about electoral politics and just want to focus on organizing. That's fine. That's fine. But then if you want to talk about electoral politics, engage in the fucking reality. It's so enraging to hear this kind of stuff all the time.
Kowalski from Nebraska. Part of the Inflation Reduction Act included clauses that state 70% of a product must be made within the United States or 60% within America, which means you can't do capital flight by moving to Vietnam, China, or other nations. Yes. Nebraska voter Peter Thiel is like a citizen of 3 countries to avoid taxes. Not surprised. He should be banned from the United States. 315 letter carrier. I mean, let's stop letting in these immigrants, right? How do you fund the government without taxation? 315 letter carrier. Well, the government, we have I don't want to get too deep into it, but we print money. Our government prints money all the time, and they can print more or they can print less. The reason why you have taxation, it's not so much, I don't think it's as necessary to fund the government as it does to give money value. David Graeber wrote about this. The reason why we all agree to use the US dollar is because it's what our government, the only thing our government will accept for taxation. And if you don't pay your taxes, people think I'm a horrible person for saying this, you go to jail, theoretically, at the end of a long process. And so that's why our money has value. This currency was, it was developed like when Rome would go conquer other countries, and they needed to have their soldiers have the capacity to buy, chickens or bread or whatever it is from local people. They would give them currency that they would then say, like, I'm going to pay you 10 Roman dollars. I don't remember what the currency was. For this chicken. And incidentally, we're also here to collect taxes, which is 1 Roman dollar or 2 Roman dollars. And the only way you're going to get the Roman dollars is allow us to buy a chicken from you. That's what gave the currency value. And so taxation both provides our currency with its value and also is a means in which to redistribute money.
Yeah, leveling.
Well, you can set up a taxation scheme that actually doesn't level, which is part of the problem with some of our taxation scheme, right? Like when you say we're going to tax labor, your income tax is going to be 25% or 30% on, and you make your money through labor, W-2 wages. However, if you make your money through an investment, we're only going to charge you 20% taxes. That is a way of actually upward distributing money. I mean, governments only exist, well, not only, but largely exist to redistribute or to distribute, frankly. And the question becomes not whether government should distribute or redistribute. The question becomes for whose benefit. And this is the thing that is really obscured when we talk about governments and we talk about economies. That it's not a question of whether to redistribute or distribute. It's a question of to whom do we do this? Do we do it to the greatest amount of people, or do we do it to a smaller group of people?
The job creators.
That's it. Let's see. It's tricky. I got a tiny little screen.
To those Apple VR goggles for next.
Those would look nice.
Philly cheesesteak. If Trump stuck to that argument comparing to the 1920s, this flaw is the comparison may be. It resonates with a lot of people, but he steps on his own message. The bigger question is, why can't Harris move the needle? I'm not sure.
Okay, so I mean, again, I just want to point out, like, there's numbers here. Basically, the politics average is that she's been ahead by 3 points since August 12th, and that really fundamentally hasn't changed in the aggregate. So I just, I think we're being that's
basically Trump's needle has stayed the same, and Kamala's has edged slightly upward.
Yeah.
Should we watch this Matt Walsh video, since we're talking about taxation and we're talking about
Sure.
distribution to the rich? This is clip number 12 on Matt Walsh's Daily Wire show.
And did you notice something about the tax brackets?
Pause it. Can I just say one thing? Pause it.
Logo?
I always forget how fashy his new logo is. It really is super fashy.
I mean, honestly, when I look at it, it looks like it's a ski resort or something like that. Like, here, come to Vermont.
Actually, that does look like a pretty ski resort. Like, you can see the reflection of the mountains on the lake in front of it. It's like Lake Tahoe or something.
I know. I want to go there, but then I see Matt Walsh's creepy beard, and much less so.
Yeah, you run for the hills.
And did you notice something about the tax brackets? These rich people are not all billionaires. In fact, almost none of them are billionaires. There are only like 700 billionaires in the whole country. Billionaires are basically irrelevant. They barely exist. 700 in a country of 330 million people. You could confiscate all of their money, take all of it.
Let's do it.
You could put a tax rate of 100% on billionaires, and it would fund the government for like a week or something.
Cool.
Okay? I mean, the government spends $16 billion a day. Okay? A day. So you could take Elon Musk's entire net worth.
Pause it for a second. Again, I just want to say this talking point is deployed because they want to tie it. They want to say that they want to tie it into this notion of, like, to fund the government. We have money to do things. We are sending hundreds of billions of dollars to Israel and Ukraine. You can argue that, one or the other is valid, or both are valid, or both are invalid. It doesn't matter. That money, like, we didn't have where'd that money come from? We had the money to do these things. And so the game that they play is that, like, you could tax all the billionaires and it wouldn't fund the government for more than a couple of weeks.
It'd be great for the economy.
It would be great for the economy. There is absolutely no reason to have 700 kings, essentially, who operate at a completely different plane of existence, who have no notion of necessities or needs, or operate with political impunity because of all this money. We don't need those people. They don't need to exist. There is no sort of natural state where there are individuals who have that much more power in society than other people, except for basically kings who have these large armies. All right, continue.
Okay, a day. So you could take Elon Musk's entire net worth and reduce him to poverty, which I know the left would love to do that. It would fund the government for what? 2 weeks? 2 weeks. So the billionaires don't matter. They don't really matter when it comes to it's marginal. They're spending so much money, and there are so few billionaires that it's a drop in the bucket. These taxes on the rich are mostly screwing over people who are not billionaires. In fact, a huge number of these people are not even millionaires. Okay, again, the top tax rate, you're talking about $600,000 for a single individual. These are not most, so these aren't even millionaires. And while that's happening, these idiot liberals are pretending that actually somehow by some voodoo magic, public school teachers are paying more in taxes than people who have to fork over 40% of their income to the federal government. And you know, we went over this already, but higher income people, by that I mean, and the IRS means, more importantly, people who make 600K or more, not billionaires, not even close to billionaires.
Oh my God, pause it for a second.
Higher income people.
Yeah, like, yes, I get, you know, like we could literally see, we now know how much Matt Walsh is making. It's over $600,000. And he's bemoaning and he's got to pay taxes. This is so oppressive to him. We are really getting, what is the percentage of people who make over 600,000 in this country? I mean, if the idea that there's only 750 billionaires, the percentage of people making over 600,000, let's see if you can look that up.
It's not the top 1%, but it's definitely the top 5%.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we're talking about a tiny percentage of the country who are really just taking it on the chin. Go ahead.
Yeah.
By that, I mean, and the IRS means, more importantly, people who make 600K or more, not billionaires, not even close to billionaires. Higher income people pay for almost everything. They get the worst deal by a long shot. They get screwed the most by our current tax system, and it's not even close. Okay? I know it's not a popular thing. It's not very populist to say that, oh, you know, boo-hoo, someone who makes 600K is getting robbed by the government. But yeah, you know what? Yeah, boo-hoo. It's a bad thing. Boo-hoo. It is a bad thing. It's actually outrageous.
No, it's not.
No,
the government is just straight up stealing nearly half of the.
Incidentally, the tax rate is lower for those people who are married. I should say, like, that's $600,000 per individual. $600,000 per individual.
This is the entire game. This is the existence of Daily Wire is underwritten by billionaires and millionaires who want to be taxed less. But if we want to move on, people might remember this. This is the guy, Asher Edelman, who was one of the inspirations for Gordon Gekko in the movie Wall Street. And this is him in 2016 when they invited him on MSNBC and he surprised people by endorsing Bernie Sanders. His explanation for what happens when you redistribute money in economy and why you should want a Bernie Sanders style policy is, I think, pretty easy to understand, much more easier than what Walsh just gave us.
Why is that?
No question. Well, I think it's quite simple again. If you look at something called velocity of money, you guys know what that is, I presume. Mm-hmm. That means how much gets spent and turns around. When you have the top 1% getting money, they spend 5-10% of what they earn. When you have the lower end of the economy getting money, they spend 100 or 110% of what they earn. As you've had a transfer of wealth to the top and a transfer of income to the top, you have a shrinking consumer base, basically, and you have a shrinking velocity of money. Mm-hmm. Bernie is the only person out there who I think is talking at all about both fiscal stimulation and banking rules that will get the banks to begin to generate lending again as opposed to speculation.
Okay.
So from an economic point of view,
and
it's straightforward.
this is, you know, we talk about this when we say things like a rich man only buys one loaf of bread a day. They are hoarding money. And not only do we see this in the context of if you give, there's 80% of Americans out there that if you give them a tax break or you give them a raise or you give them a stimulus check or you give them a child tax credit, that money is going to go out the door and it's going to go into somebody else's pocket and they're going to put it into somebody else's pocket. And that's what he's talking about with the velocity of money. we also see this dynamic in the context of Social Security. That's why we have a system that was designed to touch on 91%, to tax 91% of the income that sloshes around in our economy. But because you have people hoarding money,
right?
These ultra rich, even these even more rich, that money is not touched. It's out of the system, essentially. It's just sitting in some investment situation. It's just paying capital gains. It's not being implicated by wage taxes. This is the bottom line. But that concept of velocity of money, I mean, you're talking about from an economic perspective. Again, we get back to all governments redistribute wealth. The question is to whom is going to have that wealth? Is it going to go to a small group of people, 0.01% of the population, 0.2% of the population, 2% of the population, 5% of the population, 10% of the population? Or is it going to go to 80% of the population? Is it going to be spread out more evenly? And when it's spread out more evenly, it is far more likely to be spent. And like this guy says, it expands the consumer base, which is what our economy is based upon.
Right. And when Matt Walsh talks about, there's only 700 billionaires in America, it's not like we're talking about some, I don't know, really small minority of people who get outsized attention from right-wing media. In fact, some people make whole documentaries about a really, really small percentage of the population to try to demonize them. And that group of people doesn't have any power whatsoever. The 700, I'm talking about trans people, by the way.
Right.
The 700 billionaires that he's referring to, you know why that's a focus of the left or anybody that wants a society that's more fair? Because of the insane amount of power that they have.
Yeah.
That's the difference between, well, exactly, from the money. But that's the difference between right-wing politics about this kind of thing and left-wing politics, is because they're going after a fraction of the country that has no power. And when people talk about taxing billionaires, that's about going after the powerful to change our society for the better.
This is you can look at policy like student loan debt, which we have to talk about in morals from a moral perspective, but economically, those payments going to bankers like Mohila and stuff, or they could be going into your local community to help maybe a contractor build up your kitchen or something like that. But instead, we're just leeching all this money through policy to bankers. It's people should think about things this way.
We should say that I think it was in 2016, maybe it was a little bit later, the chairman of the Home Builders Association of America said the number one thing that was inhibiting new home building was student debt. That was almost 10 years ago. It's only gotten worse. All right, let's just listen to Matt Walsh, essentially, I don't know, grease the wheels for his patrons to give more money.
Someone who makes $600K is getting robbed by the government. But yeah, you know what? Yeah, boo-hoo. It's a bad thing. It is a bad thing. It's actually outrageous.
No, it's not.
The government is just straight up stealing nearly half of the income of millions of American families.
Is not stealing.
Millions of American workers who have worked extremely hard to get to where they are, and they have families to take care of, only to get ruthlessly punished for it.
You're punished.
So yeah, they are the victims of the tax system. Okay, I mean, they just are.
Victims.
People who make 40, 50, 60K, the average American income, they do pretty well when it comes to federal income taxes. They're getting screwed in a bunch of other ways. Everybody is. Every American is getting screwed by the system because we have an incompetent, corrupt, wasteful government and federal bureaucracy that screws everybody over. No question about it. But so we're all getting a raw deal. But my point is, when it comes to the federal income tax system specifically,
when it comes to a very specific
higher income people have by far the most to complain about.
In terms of my neurological capacity.
I mean, it's just such an absurd argument because, yes, within the and I would not use the word complain, I would use whine. The within if you're looking specifically at the top federal marginal income tax rates, then people who are making the most amount of money can whine about it the most. But if you look at every other metric within society, the cost of healthcare, the cost of education, the lack of access in some instances to healthcare or to a high quality education, the implications, the percentage that rent takes from all those people who are not making that money, the size of the percentage, like the percentages of just survival, the cost of just survival is so much higher for people who make less than $600,000. I'm only using that figure because he does, that less than $600,000 than over $600,000. That's just the reality of it. And he could say, oh, well, but that's the private market. No. That is how we decide to set up society. There is no law that says that medicine needs to be commodified. Well, I guess there is actually a law, but it's one that we could change. It's certainly one that we could change. We could add new laws that say we're going to decommodify healthcare. We're going to decommodify housing. We're going to decommodify the cost of childcare. We're going to decommodify the cost of home health care. We're going to decommodify nursing homes. I mean, these are all things that we could do. It's just a question of the choices that we make as a society. That's it. These are all things that can be done. We cut child poverty in nearly in half over the course of a 12-month period. That is proof positive that we could do all these things that we're talking about. Yep. We just choose not to. And in some instances, folks like Matt Walsh will cry about it and say that it's unfair. And then in other instances, it's just like, it's not possible to do. How will you pay for this? You can pay for it. We've done it. We got rid of child poverty by nearly half in 12 months. It's absurd that we even can have these arguments with a straight face is what we're capable of doing. But for Matt Wallace, instead of whining about that, how come we didn't continue to do that? He's whining like people are making over $600,000, really taking it on the chin in terms of federal income taxes.
Yep.
I'm crying for them.
All right, folks. We done?
I guess Matt Walsh doesn't want George Soros to be taxed. That's kind of suspicious.
Oh, I've been told that the Roman dollar was the dinar or the denarius. I should have assumed that I'd start getting. All right, let me read 5 IMs and we'll be out of here. Majority Report fanatic. The Democratic Party shouldn't be framed as a roadblock to progressivism, but a slow-moving vehicle that can be steered in the direction towards it. The Republican Party is the equivalent of a 16-wheeler that's barreling towards whatever's left of our democracy. I mean, you know, people can quibble about the metaphors, but the fact is that you have to advocate, you have to fight to shape government and to shape it in a way that it's making these political economy decisions in a way that reflect your values. And the Democratic Party is a weaker opponent for when it comes to fighting for progressive values than the Republicans are. That's just the bottom line. John D. Rockefeller Jr. In 1935, they raised the top marginal tax rate to where only one could be taxed at the top rate. Needless to say, reading the paper that morning, I was shocked. Thankfully, I didn't have to let any of my servants go because I was still rich as fuck. Boy. Where I would be taxed at the, yes, John D. Rockefeller. Okay, Jr.
Okay, we got it. Yeah.
It took me a while to figure out what was going on.
Need to sand down the edges of the Rockefeller bits, I think.
Yeah. De-waxed shellac. Sandwicher here. My dad has been in a rehabilitation nursing home for 2 months after a fall. They won't release him unless he gets more home health aid hours, but insurance, Medicare, MLTC won't cover it. So he's stuck in a situation which is probably costing more than if he was living at home. Lots of bureaucratic wrangling to appeal. Ramona Frankenstein. Here in New Hampshire, the governor signed 2 anti-trans bills into law, banning access to bottom surgery for minors, banning trans girls from playing girls' sports. New Hampshire's population is tiny, so these laws that basically target some 3 or 4 children.
Those
That's
were
kind
the
of minority.
numbers in Utah too.
Yep.
Right.
That's the kind of minority we should be worried about, Matt, not rich people. Eat the rich, you fascist pig. I assume they're talking about Matt Walsh, not you, Matt Lex.
A few.
John in Omaha. If we taxed $100 billion from the top wealthiest people, it'd be $1.5 trillion, and they'd still be billionaires. Texas left. Does this guy think that the ultra rich are listening to him? This guy is so dumb.
Well, his
No,
bosses
these
are.
Well, but it's also, and certainly his patrons, but it's also a talking point that just Republicans just love. All right, 2 more.
Sorry.
Snarkorsky, if you tax Matt Walsh more, can he afford his luxurious beard? If you prick him, does he not bleed beard oil? And the final I am of the day. Void your conscience. Funny how the same people who say man-made climate change is a myth are now claiming the government has weather machines to create hurricanes.
That's so
Well, the
funny.
government can do it, but private enterprise, of course, has no role in this at
Right.
all.
None whatsoever.
Same with censorship.
All right, folks. Well, that ends my coverage in Las Vegas, Nevada. I will be on a plane tomorrow, but we'll see you next week. Bradley,
I'll be on
plugs?
tomorrow.
Yes.
I have a question, Sam. Sorry.
yeah.
That thing we're sounding that kind of sounds like gunshots. Is that the people whacking the golf ball into the
Yes,
tarp again?
they moved me down.
God.
They moved me down.
I
the,
thought that was a door.
No, they moved me down the other end. Yeah, there it is. They're doing it again. There's a booth with like somebody hits golf balls, and then it's like
Can you
into
show
like
it
a,
to us? I mean, this
You
is
might have to have
right?
Scott maybe film you taking a whack at it and we'll play it tomorrow.
Yes, this is the
Oh, yeah.
content that we want.
Here we go. Wait a second. I don't know if that'll happen, but maybe I'll shoot it. But let's see.
But isn't that this is why we have?
Can you see it down there? Hold on.
Oh,
Let me see
with
if I
the-
can.
with the
Yeah, we
screen?
can see it. Yeah, with the
Yeah.
screen.
Is it
Hold
Top
on.
Golf?
I really don't know what this dude's right in front, but hold on. I can zoom this.
Why is it sideways?
It's like that's the
I'm
Dutch angle.
holding it.
Oh.
Dutch angle, which shows a world askew in film theory.
See that?
That's pretty awesome.
Wow. Oh, it looks like a nice vista for people to shoot their golf balls.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. You don't
Yeah.
even need to see the sun. when you're here.
Exactly. Never leave.
Never leave.
Never stop gambling.
I will say that I am at break-even point, which
Congrats.
is thank you. I'm very happy about that. I haven't gone.
You're playing the game called capitalism.
That's right. That's right. Just a reminder, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. And don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, and hot chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, you get 10% off. Emma, ESVN.
Today, Bradley and I have been giving our picks for Week 6 in the NFL. We're going to go a little earlier today, so check us out. We'll be live soon on youtube.com/ESVN show.
Matt, Left Reckoning.
Left Reckoning, Tuesday we talked about Claudia Sheinbaum coming to power in Mexico and her plans for, massively expanding home visits for elderly patients' healthcare with Jose Luis and Kurt from the Soberania podcast down in Mexico. So check that out, patreon.com/Left Reckoning.
All right, folks. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. We will see you. Emma will be here tomorrow. Bye-bye.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive.